Hello, this history revision session is on conflict and tension, the Treaty of Versailles. The focus in this lesson is exam technique, and the particular focus is on knowledge questions. There are two knowledge questions on the conflict and tension exam paper. In this lesson, we're going to remind ourselves of the 16-mark statement questions and how we answer those. These are the most important questions on the paper because they have the most value. What do these questions look like then, and what is the expectation in answering them? So this is a question 4 on the conflict and tension paper. So there will be a statement about an event. So it might be something like Clemenceau was the most satisfied with the Treaty of Versailles. How far do you agree with this statement? Explain your answer. So this is worth 16 marks plus 4 marks for spelling, punctuation and grammar. So in this particular question, you're evaluating, you're judging, you're thinking about how far you agree with that particular statement. And I really like this question because you're at least told what to write about in the first paragraph. The first paragraph is all about whatever that event or thing is you've been asked to talk about. So I gave the example a minute ago of Clemenceau being the most satisfied with the treatment with the Treaty of Versailles. So in this particular one, you start off and you talk about, well, what did Clemenceau want? What did he get? How satisfied was he? So you're addressing that statement, you're explaining the concept mentioned and link it back to the question. If it was a question based on steps to World War II about the Nazi-Soviet pact and how that was the main reason for the outbreak of war, well, you'd be explaining that and the reasons it led to war. In paragraph 2, you do exactly the same thing, but you pick another one. If again it was a question about the Treaty of Versailles and it was about the peacemakers, well, you've already dealt with Clemenceau. So in paragraph 2, you could deal with David Lloyd George or you could deal with Woodrow Wilson. That's a really, really simple one to move on to. If it was one about, foreign policy and Hitler's aims, you might look at another main reason for war. Paragraph 3, you do exactly the same thing. You're making sure though that you're feeding back to the question. So you're showing agreement or disagreement with the statement throughout. And finally, in your conclusion, you answer the question. How far do you agree with the statement? Do you completely agree with the statement? Do you partially agree with the statement? Do you not agree with the statement at all? It's really important that you do that in your conclusion. But also in your conclusion, you're trying to link some of these ideas together and show how they kind of all work together. This question would take around 20 to 24 minutes to answer in an exam. That's almost half the time. It's a third to half the time of actually this conflict and tension paper. So it's important that you get this one right. Here's our first example then of this kind of question if we're talking about the Treaty of Versailles. So the main reason why Germany hated the Treaty of Versailles was because of its military terms. How far do you agree with this statement? Explain your answer. So again, it's worth 16 marks, force bag, 20 to 24 minutes to answer it. Let's have a think about what we would include. Here we begin by looking at the factor that is discussed in the question or in the statement. So the main reason why Germany hated the Treaty of Versailles was because of its military terms. So let's start with the military terms. So you begin in your answer by talking about, well, what were these military terms? What did Germany lose in terms of their armed forces? And really importantly, why did this make Germany hate the treaty? Because we're weighing up, we're evaluating the greatest reasons why Germany hated the Treaty of Versailles. So make sure that you're really specific. Make sure you're putting in points such as German army was reduced to 100,000 men. They only had 6 battleships. They weren't allowed submarines. Those are the kind of facts that you need in your fingertips in order to do a good job of answering this question. Here then is my first paragraph and how I would have tackled this. So what I've done is I've got a little box here which is my key for this. So in yellow, anything where I've put in some knowledge of the military terms of the Treaty of Versailles, because that's what I'm talking about here, I'm going to highlight in yellow. And anything where I'm making that reference back to the statement, I'm making it really clear why Germany hated the treaty, I'm going to colour in blue. So I start off referring back to the statement straight away. Military restrictions placed on Germany were a major reason for Germany hating the treaty. And I'm going straight to some knowledge now. Under the treaty, the German army was limited to 100,000 men. The navy was cut to 6 battleships, and they were forbidden to have conscription, planes, or submarines. So all of that is some good focused knowledge on military losses. In addition to this, the Rhineland was demilitarised, a humiliation. This all seemed unfair to Germany. So now we're looking at really why Germany really hated it. So we're going to go to our blue colour. They were a nation who placed a great deal of pride in their military. They had been created due to a series of wars up to 1871. The Germans were also angry as they felt they would not be able to defend themselves from attack. They were surrounded by hostile nations who could exploit their weakness, a major cause for concern. So notice there, plenty of knowledge, but also plenty of reference to why Germany hated the treaty. What I haven't done in this paragraph is just listed what happened to Germany. That's only part. The understanding of what the military terms is part of this paragraph, but it's also making it clear why Germany was unhappy. That's the second and really important thing to do. For my second paragraph, I thought, well, what was something else that the Germans hated about the Treaty of Versailles that I could write a good paragraph about? So this time round, I've decided to look at the loss of land or territorial terms. So again, in this particular paragraph, I need to talk about what territorial and land losses did Germany have, but also, and of equal importance, why did these things make Germany hate the treaty? Let's have a look at how I tackled this. I've selected the same 2 colours again, this time round, yellow for knowledge and a bit of blue for wherever I've referred to why Germany hated that thing. So another area which caused serious distress, so I'm showing it's upset the German people, were the territorial changes. Oops, full stop missing there, never mind. The treaty forced, I'm talking about what actually happened now then, the treaty forced Germany to lose all its empire administered by France and Britain as mandates, 10% of its land in Europe, including Alsace-Lorraine, the Polish corridor and the Saar coalfields for 15 years, and Anschluss with Austria was forbidden. The Polish corridor was a territory which caused most anger. The loss of West Prussia meant that East Prussia was now separated from the rest of Germany. This seemed grossly unfair. The way that Germany was treated did not seem to fit with Wilson's idea of self-determination. Other countries had borders containing their own citizens. What about Germany? There was anger all over Germany. So again, there's that balance between what they actually lost and how it made them feel. I decided that the final thing that I was going to examine and have a look at was going to be war guilt and reparations, because these were things that also made Germany hate the Treaty of Versailles. It's important that when you're dealing with war guilt, that naturally leads into reparations. I treat them as kind of the same thing, because without war guilt and Germany taking the blame, you wouldn't actually have had reparations, because they had to pay the compensation because they admitted it was their fault. So you talk about war guilt, you talk about reparations, and then of course, exactly the same as we've done in the other 2 paragraphs, we then would discuss, well, why did that make Germany hate the treaty? Let's have a look at what I've written this time. Again, I'm going for yellow for knowledge, and I'm going for blue for that reference to why they hated the treaty. So finally, the Germans were enraged about clause 231 of the treaty. So now I'm going to go into what this was. This meant that Germany had to admit responsibility for causing all the loss and damage to which the Allied governments and their peoples have been subjected as a result of the war. This is why they hated it. They believed this was a lie. To the Germans, Russia had started the war with their mobilisation in July 1914, but it justified reparations. These were eventually set at £6.6 billion. This was a sum that the Germans declared they simply couldn't pay. The Germans had massive war debts, and much of the population had already been on the brink of starvation. And they hated it because reparations would increase this suffering. Industry had been devastated, and giving the Tsar to the French was another blow. The reparations were seen as an attempt to starve German children, a real cause of anger and resentment. A conclusion is a really, really important part of this question, because not only are you demonstrating that you've understood the question, you're answering the question, explaining how far you agree, but you're also trying to make links between the things that you've already written about in your answer. Let's have a look at how I've tackled that. It's a little bit different this time. So we've got judgments, which I'm going to highlight in green, and we've also got links between different parts of the treaty and reasons for German hatred in purple. So let's have a look where I've made a judgment to start with there. In conclusion, the military terms of the treaty were certainly a major cause of anger. I therefore partially agree with the statement. The military was a great source of national pride in Germany, and limiting this so much was a humiliation. I'll continue to make a judgment here, look. War guilt and reparations also caused real suffering and anger. The German people felt that this was a part of the treaty was particularly unfair. However, the territorial changes were possibly the part of the treaty which caused the most anger and resentment. So that's me judging again here that actually I don't think it's the military terms, I actually think it's territory. Germans were living under foreign rule. This was the basis for Hitler's aggressive foreign policy actions of the 1930s, proof that the German people never forgot the humiliation of the treaty. Now I'm going to link it all together. A combination of all of these factors led to deep and lasting resentment. Perhaps one or two of the terms could have been forgiven. All of them together led to a hatred and a huge desire for revenge. So I'm showing that I've understood that these terms didn't work in isolation. That's the kind of thing you need to be writing about in a conclusion. See that this is detailed, just as detailed as other paragraphs in the whole of the rest of the answer. And I've made it really clear what I think and why I think it. We now have a second example. This is another one of the classic type of Treaty of Versailles questions that you can get as a 16 marker. So we've got the ones about the Treaty of Versailles itself and the terms, but we've also got ones about the peacemakers and their satisfaction. So this one says, Clemenceau was the least satisfied of the big three by the Treaty of Versailles. How far do you agree with this statement? Explain your answer. So in this one, again, it's really, really obvious what you talk about in your first paragraph. In your first paragraph, you are going to talk about, well, what did Clemenceau want? What did he get? And how satisfied was he? Think about the reactions in France as well and think about what happened to his job. What I'd like you to do is pause this for 5 minutes and have a go at writing that particular paragraph, making sure you do all of those three things, because that way you can really weigh up and judge how satisfied he was. But you can't do that unless you know what he wanted and what he got. Obviously, within what he got, you're also going to think about what he didn't get as well. The second paragraph is also really nice because, again, it's dead easy to know what to talk about. You've already talked about Clemenceau and the question is asking about the satisfaction of the big three. So you pick another one of the big three and you do exactly the same thing. So this time I'd like you to write about Wilson. What was it that Wilson wanted from the peace conference and the treaty? What was it that he got and didn't get? And how satisfied was he? Tackle this in exactly the same way, making sure that you're really thinking about what he wanted, what he got, and of course, his levels of satisfaction. Again, pause this for about 5 minutes and have a crack at that paragraph. After having tackled paragraph 1 and 2, it should become no surprise what the third paragraph is all about. It's going to be about Lloyd George. Exactly the same things. What did he want? What did he get? What didn't he get? How satisfied was he? Again, pause for 5 minutes and have a go at that one. In your conclusion, then, you're going to make your judgment based on what you've written for the rest of the answer. So Was Clemenceau the least satisfied? Make sure you make real reference back to the statement. Why? Why not? So, yes, I think he was the least satisfied. No, I disagree with his statement. Explain. Also, try and make sure that you make links between them. Is there any reason why some of the people got more than others? Is there any reason why none of them were less satisfied? Think about in this conclusion about the compromised nature of the Treaty of Versailles. Again, pause this, 5 minutes, absolute maximum. You might be able to do this in about 3 to try and bring it all together for a conclusion. If you haven't had a go at this now in your own time by pausing it each time after each paragraph, have a go at it now. The question could be done in different ways, of course. It might say Wilson was the least satisfied, it might say Lloyd George, it might be Clemenceau was the most satisfied. This question can come in a variety of different ways, as could the one that we looked at earlier. Make sure you send any work that you do to your teacher to have a look at.